We are live. I'm here today with Dr. Maryska Taylor, a wonderful naturopathic doctor and a dear friend of mine that I have known for a long time now.
Yeah.
And Dr. Taylor has over 20 years of experience in helping women really get to the root cause of autoimmunity, of burnout, fatigue. And, for Dr. Maryska, she's going to talk to you more about this as we go on, but she struggled long-term with psoriasis, which is a form of autoimmune, but also something really visible on the body and can be very stressful when you're dealing with something that's so visible, which I'm going to talk to you about more, as some women struggle with autoimmunity that maybe no one can see from the outside. But when you're struggling with something that everybody can see, that can be really difficult and challenging in a whole nother way. So Dr. Taylor, because of these struggles and because of her journey and her healing, she has created something called the Art of Living. And it's a really mind, body, spirit methodology that helps women understand the root cause of why they're experiencing what they're experiencing and really bring them back to their spirit, to their own being, and reviving their vitality and helping them feel like themselves again in a good way, energized and really at their best self. Is that right?
Yes, sounds great.
So I'm going to open with something that you've said to me, and I've heard you talk about, is that you often say your body isn't broken. It's just not being heard or it's not responding. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, I guess I can start with my own experience where, with my own health journey, so often I just thought that there was something wrong with me. Like, you would see other people who seem to have it easier, or, they just do this and it like, something radically changes for them or they heal. And my health journey was never such like a straight journey. It's kind of been like all over the place. And I often had this narrative going on in the back of my mind that like, well, there must be something wrong with you. Like your body must be broken, or I'd feel like my body had betrayed me. In the most recent kind of upheaval with my health that I've gone through, like I really felt like my body had betrayed me. And, we'll talk in a minute about how that wasn't true at all. But I realized, I've been working with women in their health for over 20 years, whether that was in the capacity as a naturopathic doctor or a personal trainer or, exercise physiologist or pastor. Like I've been working with women for a long time. And I think for many of us, there is that underlying narrative of like, it must be me. Like right. I must be the problem.
Or I'm doing something so wrong that I'm not doing it right.
Yeah, exactly. And so they just assume that the problem must be them. They must not be disciplined enough. Their body must just be broken. They're flawed. And that's not the case at all.
And for you, when did it click that there wasn't something wrong, and also that the things that you were experiencing in terms of the skin, the energy, the stress, weight gain, that it was also kind of coming from the same source, or there was maybe one or two main points you had to look at?
Yeah. So I think, again, like my journey's kind of been evolving over a long time, but, the psoriasis was kind of the beginning, and it took me, and I've learned so much from that, and I've healed it, like put it into remission like several times. And there was a lot of learning. And then like burnout, but it wasn't until I reached a point where I had gained 50 pounds, and I've never had an issue with weight. Like I had gained a lot of weight with my pregnancy.
Yes.
And lost it really easily. Like whenever I wanted to lose weight, I would just, kind of go back to the things that worked for me and have no issue with that. So it wasn't until my body, like I just kept gaining all of this weight, and I gained 50 pounds, and that was really abnormal for me.
And that happened over how long? How fast did that 50 pounds come on?
So I had turned 40, and it was around 2021, and that time in general was like pretty crazy for
Sure.
everybody.
Yes.
And so at first I thought, oh, it's just stress and like, everyone's eating at home making sourdough. Like maybe it's just like
I
the
was
amount
making
of
sourdough.
like maybe it's just that. So, but I would say over the course of a year, I just kept gaining weight, and all of the efforts to lose that weight were not bearing fruit. Like nothing was working. And then I started getting other weird things. So it was like, I'd get this weird swelling in my eyes, or like I would get rashes on my face. And then the fatigue was setting in. And I had dealt with fatigue before. I had had a bout of Epstein-Barr. You and I've talked about that before. And I thought, gotten past that. I had also been vegan for a year and a half, 2 years. And I think that really trashed my resiliency. We can go into that more in a minute. But I think it was kind of like a combination of things that led me to being less resilient. But I started gaining all of this weight, and I started having all these strange other symptoms that had never occurred before. Fatigue was a big one. Like I was having to sleep like 3 or 4 hours a day just to function, like to cook and take care of my family, like pick up my son from school. I had to stop working. I started getting psoriatic arthritis, so another autoimmune condition. But ironically, like it was the weight that was the thing that bothered me the most, because
Which it is for a lot of women. Again, kind of taking it back to something that the outside world can see so easily, right?
Yeah. I was like, I'll take the joint pain. I'll wake up stiff. Like I'll even take the swollen eyes or whatever, but I'm like, but just like, can we just get rid of this weight? And so there was this very much this adversarial relationship that I had developed with my body of like just trying to get it to like beat it into submission, really. And it was finding mold in our home that was my aha moment. And I had this moment where I was, looking at how to heal the mold toxicity and how to address it. And I had this moment where I realized my body had no capacity to deal, like it was overwhelmed dealing with all the toxins. And it had been, I was reading something and they were talking about the body putting the toxins into our stored fat. And all of a sudden I had this moment of like, oh my God, my body's been protecting me. This weight has been protective weight. My body hasn't had the capacity or the resiliency left to deal with all these toxins. It's been overwhelmed. So it's literally like been like throwing it in the closet. It's like, if you think of like a stuffed closet, it was just throwing toxins into fat cells because it was like, we can't deal with this right now. We don't have the capacity right now to deal with this. So we're just going to pack it away. And that was when I started to make the connection between the weight and the toxic load that my body was carrying. And then I started to connect the dots from there.
And, with my personal Hashimoto's history, you've had the psoriasis and these other autoimmune things that have come up. When people think of autoimmune, and I talk to my patients about this often, even though autoimmune is presenting in different ways in the skin, in the body, a lot of autoimmunity has a root cause, right? Like the similar root causes in terms of toxicity, gut health. A big thing is nervous system regulation, which we'll get to in a little bit.
Yeah.
When in your practice with autoimmunity, where do you look first? Do you look at toxins first?
It's one of the things I look at. I just want to kind of go back like to the idea of like thyroid and skin and like, yes, they're both, psoriasis and thyroid, like they're both autoimmune conditions. And I really do think that nothing's really black and white, but I would say like across the board, it's pretty safe to say that like all autoimmunity has the same root causes. And so it's just your individual genetics, like you're like the chink in your armor, like how it's going to show itself, whether it's in your thyroid, whether it's your skin, whether it's your bones, like it just really depends. Your gut, like with Crohn's or something like that. So when someone comes to me with autoimmunity, the first few things, I kind of go back to my methodology and I kind of go through mind, body, spirit and look at these main pillars in those areas. So I will look at nervous system. Like I'll look at a history of trauma. I'll look at their gut health. I'll look at toxin load. I'll look at their circadian biology. I'll look at boundaries and mindset. So I'll look at, are they living in alignment with their purpose? Do they feel joy? Like there's a lot of things, but I would say, physically, I always go to like gut, toxin load, and nervous system.
Yes.
And circadian biology. Those are, really big ones.
And it's so interesting because I've had many patients over the years that developed Hashimoto's right after a major trauma or event, like a death of a loved one, a death of a parent, a major car accident. And they'll say, I was fine until this happened. Or sometimes they're not even linking it. It's, 5 years ago, I developed that. And my first question usually is, what was happening at that time?
What was the thing that told your body it wasn't safe?
Exactly.
What was the threat? And
yes.
It's interesting. Sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to say, like, every time my psoriasis has flared, because I'd put it back in remission and I'd be fine for years, and then something else would happen. And I feel like each time it's been like a layer of the onion, and it's taught me something different. So like the first time it would have been, like it was something more tangible. It was a reaction. It was a vaccine injury. That's the first thing that triggered. That was the threat. Yes. And then the second was emotional. I had a breakup, and it broke my heart. So it was an emotional stress. And then, and then I went through divorce, and so each time, like there's been like, what was the threat? And then, like one of the latest ones, or the latest was the mold.
Yes. And so it's interesting too, because it's not necessarily the same system that's being triggered. It's a threat, but the threat is coming from a toxin or an emotional or a trauma, or, it can be different areas. And that, I think, sometimes is why autoimmunity, in my opinion, has not really been properly addressed in the conventional system, because it's not straightforward. And there is so many different areas that need to be addressed and looked at.
100%. You have to look at the whole person and look at the different systems, and it's not just physical, right? Like, especially when you get into areas of nervous system, trauma, mindset, like all of that. So, yeah.
And do you find now with your psoriasis in remission, it's hard to say, I'm sure, but is there certain things that okay, that for sure has helped? That is something I need to absolutely maintain in my daily life. Getting rid of the mold, I know for one.
Yeah. And again, I would like group the mold in like the toxin bucket, so I would say, like, especially like for my skin and those like my patients who specifically with skin, I would say there are these kind of like legs of a stool that are like kind of the 3 things or 4 things that I would go between. And nervous system, like managing stress. And that doesn't mean that like you don't have stress. It's just like learning how to be more resilient with stress. So like learning how, like, okay, like you may have stress, but then you come back to center. So creating that nervous system resilience is really important. Gut health is like absolutely paramount. And as you know, that's not just like one little thing. It's like what you're eating, but also like nervous system ties so much into that because the vagus nerve and how it innervates the gut. So there's a huge intimate connection between the gut and the nervous system, but also like toxin load. And I also really think there's the energetic frequency, like part of this that's really big, because of the skin being a boundary between us and other people. And, boundaries, energy management, saying no, all that sort of stuff. We can get into that if you want, but.
Well, I'm curious because I know my patients ask me sometimes what I do for my stress reduction. Do you have something a daily practice, or something you definitely know really and effectively helps your stress?
100%. So I teach a lot of nervous system tools in my programs and when I work with people, which are very physical, tangible, like somatic exercises that signal safety to the body, because often it's not even like a conscious thing. Like the body needs to like have that tactile messaging of like a clear signal, clear information that it interprets as safety. So there's some simple somatic exercises that I teach. And like, even just as simple as sitting and breathing deeply by focusing on the exhale. That's something that, someone can practice like right now. Other things. So I like to bookend my day because I tend towards fighting, like the fight response. So there's the F responses, there's fight, flight, which are like hyper. And then there's fawn, freeze, and flop, which are more hypo responses of the nervous system. So I tend to, like, my home away from home is I'll stay in like fight. So I'll brace. Like I notice that like my jaw, like I'll be clenching my jaw.
I do that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Or I'll ruminate on something and I'll be like having a full on debate with someone or about something in my head. And those are all low grade fight responses. And we can become habituated to that. Like, we can become addicted to those states and those hormones, stress hormones that our body produces when we're in those states. So I think I like to bookend my day with, a few nervous system healing tools. Also, I find light is a big deal for me and my nervous system. So getting out in the morning, I literally got a dog so that I would have to go for a walk in the morning and the evening. That's one of the reasons why we got a dog. And so taking my dog for a gentle walk in the morning light is a really big calming thing for me. And then in the evening as well. So I think those are, two really simple things. And then throughout my day, I try to just catch myself, just have like a little mindful moment where I catch myself and I'll be holding my breath or bracing, and I'd bring myself back into my body, close my eyes, put my hands on my body, bring myself back, and then take a couple deep breaths.
Yeah, those are great. And I'm glad you mentioned walking, because for me, that is it. It's so simple. And I find that it's really, once I get to be around the 20 or 30-minute mark, I actually feel my whole system kind of come down. It's not always at first. And that is what I've really integrated into most days. Most days now I try and walk somewhere between 30 to 45 minutes. And it's a huge stress reduction and gets the body moving and the lymphatic flow moving and all the other benefits too.
And it's, bonus if you can do it in nature. And, even more bonus if you can do it with your shoes off, which I know is not accessible to everybody. But if you can get your feet on the ground, do some grounding.
The grounding in the backyard or in the front yard. Yes. Yeah. So because we're going to get into weight loss in a moment, because that's been such a big part of your journey too. When you're talking about the body shifting out of survival and back into repair, what's kind of happening physiologically, and why may that keep someone stuck in their weight loss journey?
Yeah. So when we go into a stress response, it's a physiological state, right? Where the body's going to prioritize safety over long-term repair. So all of those systems that happen, or pathways that, like are humming along in homeostasis when we're in parasympathetic, so rest and digest state, those get thwarted. And it's like, like fertility and digestion, your body's like, no, we need to survive. So automatically we go into sympathetic mode, and the body is wired for survival. So it prioritizes all the pathways for survival. And so automatically that tells us like we're not going to heal in a stressed out state. So if you're chronically stressed, it's not, creating the conditions for you to heal.
Right.
And survival mode is also not just feeling stressed all the time. Like you can be living in survival and feel normal because you've habituated to that state. So you may not feel stressed, but your body is still like in the background, like living in a low grade fight or flight response. So, things like your stress hormones, blood sugar stability, inflammation, cravings, digestion, hormonal balance, like all those things can be thrown off from living in that state and being in a physiological fight or flight state. So when it comes to weight loss, it really affects, like at the beginning, like if you have an acute event of stress. Sometimes it'll help us lose a little bit of weight because the body's mobilizing glucose and like we're getting ready to fight, right? Or to
Right.
run away.
Yes.
And like we can burn through a lot of fuel. But when that happens chronically, what actually happens is the metabolism will downshift and the body will like, I got to hang on. I got to hang on
Yes.
to this weight. I got to hang on to all these things because I don't know what's happening. Are we going into starvation? Like, are we going
Yes.
into like,
Famine, drought.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
There's a
So
stressful event. I got to prepare. Yeah.
exactly. So the metabolism, well, the body in general will downshift metabolism. It'll hold on to water. It'll increase appetite. It can reduce thyroid conversion, as you know. It can disrupt insulin sensitivity, and in general, it just impairs your recovery. So, that's why we don't want to live in a state of survival all the time.
And I know for my appetite, if I have not gotten enough sleep, those are my hungriest days. And I know it's not because I'm actually hungry. It's because I'm tired. The body's
Yeah.
looking for energy, right?
Yeah. It's looking also for signals of safety.
Yes, right. Again, going back to safety, which is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the main warning signs of, you mentioned some of them like clenching the jaw, digestion. What are some of the things that you wish women would know in terms of warning signs of being overly stressed or burned out before it gets too bad?
I think one of the biggest ones is your mood and how irritable you are.
Hmm.
So like, just have less capacity for people and maybe little things that wouldn't have bothered you. Like I know for me, I know when I'm um, reaching capacity when I have no time or patience for my child's stories. I know that sounds like so bad as a mom, but you're just like, oh my gosh, get on with it. And like, but you just get really impatient or you get more irritable. Like that's, I think, a big one for women. And that's like a sign like, whoa, okay, like I'm at max, like my bucket is full. I need to empty the bucket. I need to like come back. Signs with sleep, cravings, I think is a big one. Also weight loss resistance or weight gain, that can be a big sign. Feeling tired and wired. So, waking, not feeling rested. That's a sign that your adrenals are really taking a hit. Waking in the middle of the night, losing joy, libido, all those
Yes.
things. Yeah.
Which are also tie into a lot of thyroid symptoms too, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of overlap sometimes because burnout and all the things we're talking to can also lead to stress on the thyroid, whether that's even full-blown hypothyroidism or, a lot of the patients that come to me, their thyroid, they're at a state where they're subclinical, they're watching and waiting, or they have thyroid antibodies, but their TSH is still normal. This is kind of, again, relating it back to, these are warning signs that your body
Yeah.
is trying to communicate something to you where it's saying, I need help in these areas before you have to be quote unquote medicated for life necessarily, right? Maybe
Yeah.
there's something we can do before to shift this before we need to introduce those other interventions.
Yeah. And I think, again, like kind of looking holistically at it, like what are the warning signs, mind, body, spirit. So you might have some things physically showing up, and then what are the things like, do you have the need to control?
Right.
Like that's it, like, the irritability and the need to control are like two big ones where it's like, there's, again, the body is sensing that it's not safe. So therefore it wants to control the details.
And do you think that is more of a trait of women? Because I see that in a lot of mothers specifically. They want control over certain things. Do you think that's a trait with motherhood or not necessarily? It's a trait more with burnout?
I don't know. That's a good question. I know because I mainly work with women. Um, I know that we definitely will express it maybe more commonly in this way. Like we will polish the molecules sort of situation. Like we will go in there, like every little detail, like let me micromanage all the details, because
Right.
then I can control my environment, and that control gives me that false sense of safety. So I
Yeah.
know because the nervous system reads unfamiliar as unsafe. So if I can create familiarity and predictability in my environment, my nervous
Yeah.
system reads that as safety. So
Yes, that
that's
makes
why
sense. Mhm.
that's why there's the need to control. It's not because like you're a bad person It's quite literally that you're like, I don't feel safe. And so subconsciously, I'm going to do these things so that my body, there's some sort of predictability. I can create that safety that my nervous system is looking for.
Right. Which ties into routine too, having a
Yeah.
routine, which I find really helpful for my nervous system. I've
Yeah.
always loved routine. My kids like routine.
Yeah.
So that's something I really try and keep in my daily rhythm. But there's also that fine balance between having the wiggle room and the flexibility some days when you're veering off your routine. And I know that's not as easy for me and other people that love the routine because we want
Yeah.
that predictability.
I would say, like, therefore rigidity, like having that rigid, like, losing that ability to be flexible, like that is another sign of, loss of resilience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of shifting back into this weight loss, on your page, it says, what if everything you've been told about weight loss is wrong? Tell us
Yeah.
more about that.
So what I'm referring to when I say that is that, the general eat less and move more rule that
Yes.
many of us, like that diet culture is kind of like jammed down our throats, our whole lives. And so for many women, I know for me, like, especially when I had that big weight gain, like that was my go-to. I was like, well, I'll just eat a little less and move more.
Yes.
And that always worked for me. Again, like I had never had an issue with weight until I did. And it didn't work. And then again, those thoughts of like, well, there must be something wrong with me. And so what a lot of women will do is they'll push harder. They'll just assume like, well, I need more discipline. The problem must be me. I don't have enough willpower. So they'll push harder. Another myth is that they just don't have enough willpower, that they need to push harder. So I think for some women in the short term, that idea of eating less and moving more may work. Like you may see like a little shift on the scale, but eventually it will backfire because the majority of us who get to this point where we have this weight loss resistance, it's not because we need to eat less and move more or we have an issue with willpower. It's quite literally that the body is trying in so many ways to communicate like, hey, there's something else going on. And I see therefore weight loss as another symptom, like another way that the body's trying to communicate that the foundations of health are askew, that like there's something missing, that there's something not right. Yeah.
And this, this begs a topic for me because I have this conversation with people about, I agree. I don't think it's always eat less and move more. But what about the quality of food? I think this is and this is a whole nother topic. Maybe
is a calorie, like, like that whole thing, like, can you have 100 calories of Doritos and 100 calories of blueberries? And are they the same?
And what would you say about that?
So I have seen it where patients have, especially when we get to tracking macros, so your macronutrients. So when you're actually tracking and measuring the calories that you're eating and the amount of protein and carbohydrates and fat, and if they can make it fit their macros, like, so it's like, okay, well, if I have X amount of grams of fat or carbs that I can eat in a day, well, I'll just eat this cheesecake, right? Yes. Versus eating, something else that is more nutrient dense. And you can make very nutrient dense cheesecake, by the way. I do that, but just junk food versus, or in processed food versus whole foods. I do think it's a huge difference. And I think calories are not the be all end all. Like, yes, I do think calories matter, but I think nutrients also matter. And you can have someone getting like 2,000 calories a day of nutrient void food, and they're going to have a harder time losing weight than a woman who's eating 2,000 calories of nourishing, beautiful whole foods, and her body is getting very different nutrition and therefore getting very different signals, right? She's getting signals of satiety. She's getting like all those minerals and vitamins. And so her health is going to be radically different. So I think calories matter, but I also don't think that they're all equal.
I agree. And especially with some of these artificial flavors, artificial colors, they send signals to our brain that is mismatched information. So a lot of these, and we see this with some of the studies with artificial sweeteners, that they were designed to help with weight loss. Meanwhile, we see the studies show that they actually may increase cravings, and over time may also increase weight because the person becomes hungrier over time. So how you're saying about nutrient void food, I think it's when I talk to patients about I don't like to use the word diet. I mean, we're going to get into like metabolic flexibility, but really when you're looking at meal planning, it's like a lifelong thing. It's not let's do a crash diet for X amount of time. It's how are we changing your system? How are we going to actually work with you so that you can have a diet that's enjoyable and nutritious that you can maintain for a long term?
That's just it. It's making it a lifestyle, which I know, like, I don't know, some people may hear that and roll their eyes, but what I mean by that is it's making it so that it feels effortless. You're still
Yes.
paying attention and you're still doing things intentionally, but you love what you eat. Like, I love what I eat. I don't feel like I am, deprived or anything like that. And I'm nourishing my body and I'm doing it with foods that I really, truly enjoy.
Yes.
And it is possible. It's
I
possible to
agree.
heal your body, lose weight, and eat foods that you love.
Yes, it is. So speaking of metabolic flexibility, define that in plain language for people. This is
Yeah.
something that you teach, metabolic flexibility.
So metabolic flexibility, when I'm referring to that, what I'm saying is it's the body's ability to use fuel well. So it can move fluidly between using fat, carbohydrate, and the stored fat on our body. So whether it's dietary fats and carbs that you're eating, so getting fatty acids, glucose from and other sugars like fructose, whatever, from what you're eating, or tapping in and being able to use the fuel that's stored on our body as body fat. So being able to move fluidly between fuel sources, that's what I'm talking about of flexibility. So we can lose that flexibility when we become insulin resistant. We can have metabolisms that become more rigid and not able to access the fat on our body, not able to go into fat burning mode easily. So that would be more metabolic inflexibility.
Right.
Yeah.
And speaking of a diet that you love, you personally, and this, I know this won't necessarily be, it's one form of eating is not a one size fits all, but you personally eat a much more fat and protein forward diet, correct?
Yeah. I would say 95% of the time I'm a strict carnivore, which I know for a lot of people, they're like, you only eat meat? I'm like, yeah, I only eat animal products. And I don't think that, first of all, I want to be very clear. I'm not about like any sort of like diet ideology or like black and white. I really do see it as a healing spectrum. And for me and the period of, healing that I'm in right now, I'm still very much needing to be carnivore most of the time. I will have a few plants here and there. But it was a necessity for me, especially with the mold. So I kind of see diet as like a spectrum, and the ultimate elimination diet in my mind is the carnivore diet, because we're getting rid of all plant foods. And I think, protein and fat and glucose are essential. Carbohydrates are not essential, but glucose is, because there are some cells in our bodies that only use glucose for fuel. But the body can make enough glucose from protein and fat through gluconeogenesis in the liver to satisfy that quota of glucose that the body may need. But everything that you need, you can get from animal foods. And I mean, I'm thriving and I'm healing, and I've been eating carnivore for several years. So that's just a testimony to that. And like many of the women I work with are doing the same. That said, I think that, like the animal-based foods are the bottom, like the base of the pyramid. And then you go up depending on your terrain and your individuality. And so I don't believe that carbohydrates are evil. I don't think that everybody should avoid plants. I know there's a lot of talk in the carnivore animal-based community that plants are trying to kill you. And I think it's humorous. I think, that's more just like clickbait. But I do think that, every living creature, every living thing has defense mechanisms, and there's a lot of anti-nutrients in plants. And whether it's like oh my goodness, oxalates and, lectins, like all the different ones that are there. So you have your plant or your animal based foods on the bottom. So like your meat, your fish, your eggs. Dairy is always kind of questionable for me. It really depends on the person. Raw dairy, a lot of people will do well on that. Conventional dairy, not so much. I know you and I have had this discussion.
Yes.
If I have a lot of conventional dairy, I can't do it. But if I have raw cheese or raw milk, cream, that sort of stuff, my body loves it. So you have your animal-based foods, and then you kind of move up the spectrum. So looking at kind of your low toxin plant foods, and usually they're non-starchy carbohydrates. So things like fruit, honey. I really think that plants want us to eat their fruits because, if you think of like what animals in the wild, they'll go eat the fruit and then they'll go, poop over there and spread the seeds of the plant. Right. So I think, eating fruit is very different than eating other parts of the plants or eating seeds, such as like peanuts and legumes and things like that. So it's all the non-toxic plant foods. And then on top, you have your starchy carbohydrates, your grains, things like that. So it's really about seeing it as a spectrum and understanding that I see carbohydrates as contextual. I like to eat them in season, eat them locally. They're information. They're giving us light information about where we are in like longitude, latitude. And so I don't see them as essential. I see them as information and contextual based on the person and what they have going on.
And you would say that some people can tolerate more carbs than others?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Like I know, for example, if I was to sit and eat a bowl of oatmeal, I would fall asleep almost immediately. Right. Like I get so lethargic and so sleepy. I feel gross. I will bloat up like a balloon. For me, my microbiome, my metabolism, I know the foods that I thrive on, and that's like protein and fat. I work with a lot of people so I work with women to figure out their carb tolerance. So it's like, where do you fall on this spectrum? Like, do you need to live more over in the like carnivore world or more keto, where you can bring in some plant-based foods, but you're still primarily eating, like getting your fuel from fat and protein? Or can you be over here where you're having more of an equal split with your macros and having some carbs? It's really about learning how to read your body and knowing your terrain and knowing those signs.
And out of curiosity, have you explored genetic testing with yourself or with patients to see if they, does their genetics say that they can metabolize fats very well or not?
What's interesting, I haven't done it formally, but mostly I will always ask people like, where are you from? Where are your ancestors from? And I'll give you an example of a patient. This is back when I was working at my clinic in Toronto, and she came in, she couldn't lose weight. She was having a really hard time. She had other symptoms as well. And she was eating a lot of bread and things like that. And I said to her, I'm like, well, where are you from? She's from the islands in the Caribbean. She's, from a specific island. And I was like, well, what did your ancestors eat? She's like, what did you grow up on? She's like, oh, I grew up on rice and okra and, like oxtail and like whatever. I was like, go eat that. Mm-hmm. Go eat what you ate growing up. And then she came back a month later, she had lost like 15 pounds.
Yes.
So it wasn't that she had cut carbs. It's that, instinctually, like her body knew what to do with the food that she was eating. And it involved a lot of whole foods and less processed foods. And
exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's such an important note. And I'm curious because I've had my genetic testing done, and I know that my genetic testing says I'm not a good fat metabolizer. So I had that done years ago, and I didn't even have that in my mind when I did keto. I have gone keto for a good 3 months. And for me, keto did not feel great. I didn't feel horrible, but I also, at the end of the 3 months, I was definitely not at my best, even though I was really in ketosis and so forth. And then it dawned on me that I am eating an incredible amount of fat, and my genetics testing said that maybe I don't metabolize fat, especially saturated fat, that well.
Yeah.
And my lineage on my father's side is wheat farmers. They ate a ton of wheat. So I actually now have a diet that does include a reasonable amount of carbohydrates. And it's something that works really well for me with from an autoimmune standpoint
Yeah.
too. When I was first diagnosed with Hashimoto's and going down that road, and when I developed the thyroid healing diet, I would remove gluten completely for 5 years,
Yeah.
despite having a lineage of wheat
Yeah.
farmers. But that's a whole nother topic of how
I
our
was gonna
wheat's
say
changed
the
over
wheat
time.
that you're eating now compared to the wheat that it's like heirloom grains that they were using for
Right.
both.
And maybe
Not
not sprayed with certain
not sprayed with all
things.
the yeah. Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but now I make my own sourdough bread and I eat that every
Mhm.
day, and it really works for me. So again, I love that this metabolic flexibility, this really looking at a really personalized diet for each person. But there's so many ways to look at that personalization of diet, and coming back to probably everyone should be eating a lot more whole foods and a lot less artificial packaged food.
100%. And there's so many other factors that play into it too, like the season that you're in
Yes.
and, not just, like, summer, winter, fall, but also like your menstrual cycle. Like, because there'll be women who I know, like I'll work with, and if they will have cravings for carbohydrates, which is, for a lot of women very normal in their luteal phase. And so they'll add a little bit of fruit or honey in their luteal phase, and it serves them well, and they're sleeping through the night. They feel great. And then they don't really need that in their follicular phase. So, hormones really do play into a big part of this too. And then, yeah, like seasonally, like I know my ancestors, they didn't have access unless they were stored and preserved, the fruits and the grains. And so, a lot of I really like the idea of an ancestral diet because it just makes a lot of sense. Like you eat the plant foods when they're in season, when you can gather them. And then there's like, I know I grew up on a homestead where I was taught how to can food and preserve food in a way that you're capturing all that goodness and you're preserving it, so then in the long winters you can pull it out. But when it was done, it was done. you
Yes.
know this idea of eating like bananas fresh in January and you live in Norway, like that makes no sense to me. And it makes no sense to our bodies. Our bodies are like what, like, because
Yes.
plants capture light energy through photosynthesis. So sorry, I can't speak. Through photosynthesis.
Yes.
So it's this, idea of like all this light energy that they're capturing, and that is information. And
Yes.
so I think it's very different. Like when I'm eating blueberries fresh from my family's farm, like they, have some blueberry bushes. If I'm eating those when I'm home visiting them in July, and then they gather those and they, freeze them, and then we eat them in a pie or whatever, or, eat them warmed up in December, it still carries, but that information translates. It's very different than me eating blueberries that were farmed in Peru and me eating them fresh in North
Right.
America in January.
Well,
It is different, and it does make a difference.
and because where you're consuming the blueberries are still grown where you're consuming them. You're still on the same soil, you're still in the same
Yeah.
location,
Same
and
latitude.
exactly.
Yeah.
I find that really fascinating. It's one of the reasons I love eating seasonally and eating locally. But again, the caveat is I do try and eat most things organic, and that's not always easy locally.
Yeah. Yeah.
My
It's
children had that question yesterday. Why at the grocery store do they sell organic apples that are only coming from the United States? Why can't Canada grow organic apples? It's like, well, it's a good question.
Yep. Yep.
So, muscle is medicine comes up a lot in your work. Tell me more about that.
Yes. So I have been lifting weights since I was 14, and I think I have a very different relationship than most women with weightlifting, because I grew up in an era where my brothers, I had like a brother on either side of me in birth order, and they were obsessed with like Arnold Schwarzenegger and like lifting weights. We had like Muscles and Fitness magazine like in our house all the time. And so I feel really comfortable in the gym, and I've been lifting weights for a very long time. And I've always loved muscle. I have a bachelor of science in kinesiology. I worked as a personal trainer. But I know a lot of women, see muscle or resistance training, they're kind of intimidated by it, or they just assume that if they lift weights, they're going to get bulky. And so a lot of women will shy away from weightlifting, especially something like progressive overload, and the idea of building muscle, like that kind of scares them. But muscle is metabolically active tissue and it's body armor. And I think it's also like a secret anti-ager. It's kind of like a secret weapon because, and I also really believe that muscle expands a woman's capacity. So it gives us a bigger metabolic reservoir. So it gives you like the more muscle you have, it's a glucose sink. So the more glucose, more carbohydrates you can burn, the more energy you can burn, the more muscle you have, the more mitochondria you have. And so that helps with energy output, right? Because your mitochondria, your energy powerhouses in our cells. We have better blood sugar regulation when we have more muscle, and we have, stronger nervous system feedback. So one of the interesting things about strength training is that it teaches our body that it can handle load and then return to safety. So resistance training actually helps regulate your nervous system and increase capacity because it's, a stressor that you're then recovering from and teaching it's kind of like, hormesis, where you have like the theory is that a little bit of stress helps the body like become more resilient and become stronger. Yes. So, that's the whole science behind the cold plunges and, sauna and things like that. So weightlifting does the same thing. So I think that muscle is medicine. And I see a lot of women shying away from building muscle. But when I get them in the weight room, and it can be very, very simple. It doesn't have to be complicated, but often they're shocked at how much that translates, like building a little bit of muscle, how it translates to ease with their sleep, change in their cycles, like all for the good. And because so many women are focused on shrinking their bodies. So it's about changing the mindset towards transforming through building their bodies. That's really, I think, like the big reframe when it comes to muscle.
And is it, in your opinion, does higher repetition lower weight or higher weight lower repetition? Does it matter? It's different for different women.
So I'm a big fan of progressive overload, which basically just means that you have to increase the stimulus because muscle will build according to stimulus, right? Like you can't build muscle without having some sort of stimulus to create that change, to create that growth. And so you can get that through, it's like the FIT principle. It's like digging way back in the archives of my personal training. But it's like, frequency, intensity, and the time. Yes. So you can increase the frequency, you can increase the amount of reps, you can increase the weight. Like with intensity, you can increase the amount of time, like speed up the reps, like, lengthen them out. I think progressive overload is basically you're progressively overloading the muscle. So you're progressively increasing the weight. So you'll start out with like whatever weight that you can handle to do 3 sets, depending on if it's upper body or lower body, like maybe 8 to 10 reps. And then the next time you try to increase the weight a little bit more. And maybe you can't, maybe you have to come down, but that's okay. You just continue to progress. And then eventually you'll be able to do 10 or 12 reps of that weight that was heavier before. And then you increase the weight again. And maybe you'll go down in your reps, but then you slowly come back up.
Right.
So you're progressively overloading the muscle so that it's building and becoming stronger. And again, like a lot of women are afraid that by doing that process and by building muscle that they're going to get bulky. But that's not true because we don't have enough testosterone for that, to do that. And also the irony is a lot of women will tell me, oh, I don't want to lift weights because I don't want to get bulky, but they want to look toned. And I'm like, well, the toned look that everybody's chasing comes from building muscle and losing the body weight on top of the muscle. So.
And it's so important for keeping bone health. I see this more and more as women age.
I missed that one.
The bone
Yeah.
density, yes. And I was speaking to someone yesterday who has started to reverse her osteoporosis. And the main thing she started doing was lifting weights, not tremendously heavy, but consistent weight lifting. How often are you lifting weights?
I
How
lift weights
many?
4 to 5 days a week, but often when I have, the women that I work with in my programs, like I'll have them start, even if you can just do 2 days a week, just getting in, to the gym, or even starting at home with the weights that you have is
Yeah.
enough. And again, it doesn't have to be some super complicated program. It can be really, really simple. I provide, very simple programs in Sacred Body for women, and it's, with YouTube videos, so they know, like, okay, this is the exercise, and I can go in and I can just do it really easily. And then once they get comfortable, then they love it.
Yes.
And I find it very meditative. I find, like, we talked about nervous system. What do we do for our nervous system? Like, that's a big one for me. I put in my headphones and go work out and set the world right.
I love it too. I do. I've always liked lifting weights. So I've got a few more questions for our closing. One question I forgot to ask you that I know people who are curious about a carnivore diet. What does your meals look like? What do you eat on a day, like a
Yeah.
breakfast, lunch, dinner?
So I can give you an example of what I ate yesterday. It was just pretty much what I eat. I eat a lot of the same things over and over again.
I do
I
too.
think I think simplicity is key, especially when you're trying to create change, because a lot of times, like, we'll be changing several things. And so the more simple I can make my meals, the better. Um, and again, I love what I eat, so I'm happy to eat the same things over and over again.
Yeah.
So my breakfast, what I've literally been eating, I don't know, for a good year or more, is I usually eat um, between this morning I had 5 eggs and 5 sausages. That's like what I ate for breakfast, with some butter. And I do have green tea. I like green tea. So that is what I'll have for breakfast. Sometimes I'll have a little bit of yogurt or kefir. And then I usually, like, because that's like a pretty good sized breakfast with a lot of protein. It's usually about 60 to 70 grams of protein and a good amount of fat. That will last me. And I'm really not hungry again until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So
So
usually I'll
no
go,
snacks. No
no,
snacks.
I don't snack. And that's, again, because I'm trying to keep my blood sugar. I don't need a snack to keep my blood sugar steady. I've created enough metabolic flexibility that my body, when it runs through what I've just eaten, it will go into stored body fat.
Right.
And then I will work out before I eat again. I usually just eat 2 meals a day. I'm really big into circadian fasting. Um, and then
And
for
for people that don't know, circadian fasting means essentially eating when the sun is
eating
up.
with the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that can change, and that can look different in, like, the winter and versus the summer, depending on where you live. Especially the more north you live. And I found that way of eating through experimenting, and I was like, well, this is just works for my body. And then I realized it was actually like a thing in quantum biology. I was like, oh, okay, that's what it is that I'm doing. And it because I used to do the reverse for a long period of time, because it's a form of intermittent fasting. But
Yes.
intermittent fasting is basically like you choose your window. So a lot of people will skip breakfast and then
Yes.
just eat like dinner and lunch, or lunch and dinner. Um, and then, like, skip breakfast the next day. So they're getting a fasting window. But I think for many women, especially women who are menstruating, we should be doing the opposite. So eating breakfast and, a midday meal, and then skipping dinner. And when I did that, I noticed a huge shift in my gut, because my body had time to process all the food and then rest overnight. So for detoxification and, like, gut healing, that made a really big difference for me, because I didn't have a lot of food residue sitting in my body overnight. And my
Yes.
body could focus on resting and healing versus, like, digesting food. Um, Now, and then for dinner, so just going back to what I eat, um, for dinner, I usually have like steak or chicken thighs. And sometimes I'll have, some raw cheese. I'm just trying to think. That's basically what I've been eating lately. And I'll eat like a good chunk of meat.
And we just had a comment here. How did you lose the 50 pounds, Dr. Maryska? And I'm assuming that this form of fasting was part of it and the carnivore diet.
Yeah. So I would say it was multiple things. So again, I wasn't just dealing with the weight loss. I was also at the same time healing my body from mold toxicity. And so the necessity of going carnivore was really to starve the mold, because the mold would live off of the carbohydrates that I was eating, like it would feed it. So I pulled back and went completely carnivore in order to starve the mold. And because all the symptoms were connected, it also helped me restore my metabolic flexibility, and it was helping heal my gut. And there was like all of these things that going carnivore helped me do. So that was a big part of it. And at the beginning, I didn't monitor my macros. Like I didn't monitor how much I was eating. I just ate meat. And
eggs too, or just meat at the beginning?
At the beginning, it was just red meat. Like I went full lion diet at the beginning.
Yeah, I remember. But just for the viewers that.
Yeah. So I was just eating ruminant red meat. So I was eating bison, lamb, and venison and beef. That was all I was eating.
Did you ever get tired of that or have cravings, or it was okay?
At the beginning, it was really hard. I'm not going to lie. It was like the first week was hard, but then I felt so much better and I started to see a shift. And then that encouraged me to keep going. And then I implemented the circadian, all the circadian rhythm stuff. So morning light, evening light, like really being impeccable about my light habits. So, not being on a screen. I would use blue light blocking glasses. So really being protective of light because of the influence on leptin and our body's ability to read fat stores and access fat. And that all works together. And then nervous system. So just because my body was like, what's going on? Like, are we starving? Like, what is happening? And so I worked a lot on healing my gut, worked a lot on helping it detoxify from the mold, nervous system stuff, and nervous system tools, like a lot of somatic work. And then the scale started to shift. And then I would say after about the first 10 or 15 pounds, then I started to monitor what I was eating as far as like calories and macros. And then I started to titrate down and go into a purposeful deficit.
And how long do you think, if someone is looking to lose 50 pounds, what's a reasonable amount of time? Because that comes up a lot too with me and patients, and how people want the 50 pounds gone like yesterday. But what is a reasonable weight loss marker for someone to think about?
So I will say I understand the urgency, because I felt that too, especially when I saw that it was working and I had, had that weight loss resistance for so long. And so I lost faster than I would recommend. And I lost 35 pounds in like 4 months. Like that was a lot of weight. And I ended up losing some of my hair because of that. So I had some hair loss because it was just very stressful on the body. Yes. So I don't recommend going that fast. And I've had that happen with other patients with patients of mine where they're like, I don't care. I just want it gone. And I'm like, okay, but this could happen. So, the last 15 pounds came off a lot slower purposely. Like I slowed it down. I actually took a break. I think it's great to go into like ebbs and flows. So like going into a period of like a deficit, but still doing all the lifestyle habits, and then pulling back maybe on your calories. Again, working with someone, making sure that you're not, if you're coming from a place of restriction, you don't want to then go into a greater deficit. I think the most important thing is always to establish like nourishment and safety first and get to a great baseline. And then you can look at like pulling back on your macros, like your food. And then, going into a period of a cut or a weight loss and then titrating your way back up. and staying there and stabilizing and then going back down, so that you kind of do it in stages. That's what I think is more healthy. But the first thing is always, because so many women, Emily, are coming to me from a state of deprivation and being undernourished and under eating to begin with. Like, a lot of women are not eating enough protein. A lot of women are just not eating enough food in general, and they're stressed out.
Yes. It's
And
making
so,
them feel more stressed.
yeah.
And then they're scared to eat
Yeah,
anything. Yeah.
exactly. And you sometimes you don't even need to go into a deficit to lose weight. You just need to have the signals correct. So like by
Yes.
getting your light right, and by, stopping the crazy cardio, and, letting your body know that it's safe, and you can
Yes.
still eat the same amount that you're eating and your body will lose the weight, because it was never about the food. It was about the other signals. So, I can share, like, I've shared how I lost it, just kind of like top level, but that was my journey. And I would say, like, it's really about the individual and knowing where the woman's at in her terrain and then adjusting from there.
Yes. I have another question here. What about drinking coffee? What's your take on that? Especially from, I'm thinking about it from a stress standpoint, but what do you think?
Again, it depends on the person. Like, if you are someone coming in, you're overstimulated, or you have mold toxicity or any sort of toxicity, like there's a lot of mold in coffee. So, having to be careful about the sourcing, having it be organic, mold free. And even then, I always tell my women, like, food before coffee. So
Always.
always food before coffee. And it's not that again, it's not black and white. Like, I don't think that coffee's bad. I think that coffee, when it's, a great source of coffee, it's clean and it's like had at the right time of day, if you're well nourished, it can be wonderful.
I think it's very individual though. And I always tell
Yeah.
patients when they ask me that, well, how, like, they have to be honest with themselves, because coffee
Mhm.
is so hard to give up for some people.
Yeah.
They'll give up so many other things before coffee, but it's really, I ask them, do you think coffee is good for you? After a cup of coffee or two, like, how do you feel?
Yeah.
Not the craving for the coffee, but really, how do you feel in your body? Do you feel calm and steady? Or do you feel jittery and nervous and it's increasing your stress response? If it's increasing your stress response, that is not doing anything good for
Yeah.
anything autoimmune, skin conditions, thyroid, all of
100%.
these things, that we're
Yeah.
trying to heal. And again, it doesn't mean that coffee's not ever going to be available again. Once
Yeah.
the nervous system's regulated and the skin's healed or the thyroid is improved, then maybe you can introduce coffee again when you're much more regulated and balanced.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's, again, what are you using it for? Are you
Yes.
using it to get through the day? Are you using it to kind of mask issues with fatigue? Is it a crutch? So, yeah.
I do think a lot of people crave coffee because of the dopamine hit. I think it actually makes people feel good, but is the benefit still outweighing a potential side effect from it,
Yeah.
right?
I know personally I can't drink it.
You
I
don't
get
drink
so
it.
ill. Yeah.
And I drink it from time to time. I less a few times a month, or if I'm on vacation, or and again, like you say, always after breakfast, never on an empty stomach first thing in the
Yeah.
morning.
Yeah. Never on an empty stomach.
So, in closing, I have this question for you. If a woman feels like she's tried everything, what's maybe one small thing that a woman can start doing that makes a huge impact in nervous system regulation, or really whole body healing?
Yeah. I would say three things, my top three that I would kind of do. First, get your light right.
Yes.
So in the first hour of waking, get out and get light, like on your naked eyes. So no sunglasses. You don't have to stare at the sun, but just like go outside, get some light. And then your evening light, like being careful with the amount of blue light from your phone, like just not being on a device if you can. If you have to be on a device, we're using blue light blocking glasses. So getting light right. Um, I would say another one is having regular meal timing, like having regular rhythm. Like, the body loves routine. So trying to do things consistently. And then I would say another one is protein at your meals.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of whether or not you're choosing fat or carbohydrates or a combination of both for your fuel, protein is essential. It's like the building block. So having protein forward meals, I think, is really important.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
And from a blood sugar standpoint, I do meal sequencing too. So personally, when I sit down with my meal, I always eat my fiber and protein first. And because I eat carbs, I will save my carbs for last, or at least mid-meal. They won't be
Yeah.
the first thing I eat. That really helps stabilize
Yeah.
my hormonal balance as well.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I would also encourage women, like, especially if it's someone, listening who's tried everything and really feeling a bit defeated or just like, I don't know where to go. Like, I would encourage you to sit down with a journal, a cup of tea, whatever, and just like in a quiet space and write down, like, what are all the things that you're experiencing? Like, what are the symptoms that you're experiencing? Because those are messages. And, like, once you have that down, like, what is the overall picture here? Like, can you see the forest through the trees? What is the message that your body is trying to send you? I did a whole free masterclass on this that, I invite anyone who's watching to go. You can get it on my website. You can watch it on demand. And I lead you through this process of like, here's all these symptoms, this constellation of symptoms. And then what it dwindles down to is like, here's the root causes. This is the message that your body is trying, to tell you, because disease or illness is an invitation. It's an invitation to transformation. It's an invitation to restoration. And so I would invite you to go on that journey and to begin listening to what your body is trying to tell you.
Yes. And where can listeners find you and more about Sacred Body as well? Your website?
Yeah. So my website, so drmariskataylor.com.
And I'll put that below as well.
Awesome. And then my Instagram is kind of the best place. So my website is where they can, have blog posts. I have a podcast that I'm starting up again. But there's, older episodes there that people can go and listen to. And then also the masterclass is there, and Sacred Body. And that's the program I'm currently running. And so it's there, and that's how they can work with me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and all your insights and information. I think a lot of people probably got a lot out of this.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for having me, Em.